and welcome to Live Parkinson's, Live an Exceptional Life. I'm your host, Chris Custenbotter, and I've been living an exceptional life with Parkinson's for the past 14 years. The mission of this podcast is to help as many people living with Parkinson's as possible lead a great quality of life. Today's topic is Unveiling the Causes of Parkinson's, New Insights into Disease Development. Are you or someone you know affected by Parkinson's? Discover the groundbreaking research that's shedding light on the disease origins and potential future treatments. After being diagnosed with Parkinson's, have you ever thought about, why me? Why did I get Parkinson's? I think we all probably have at some point in our Parkinson's journey. For some, maybe they have other family members with Parkinson's. For others, it remains a mystery. I played high school and college football in the late 1970s and early 1980s. I suffered a number of concussions, including the times, quote, I got my bell rung, as we used to say. In those days, they didn't have the concussion protocols they have today. Now, my original thoughts were that I developed Parkinson's from the head trauma. But based on research, I'm not sure that that's the case. Maybe it was exposure to pesticides since I grew up in a rural area. While I'm still unsure of what the cause was, I don't dwell on it, but focus my energy on living my best life with Parkinson's. However, during all of my research on Parkinson's for the podcast and the website articles, I began to come across new insights into disease pathogenesis for Parkinson's and some of the emerging areas of research that are being explored to identify some of the root causes and the potential cures or treatments for Parkinson's. So in this episode, I wanted to share some of the latest insights and research on what causes Parkinson's and how they can use the research to help identify a cure or to slow the progression. So let me give you an overview of some of the exciting new research we'll be discussing in this episode. First, we'll examine alpha-synuclein aggregation. We'll look at the role of alpha-synuclein in Parkinson's, explain the process of alpha-synuclein aggregation and its toxic effects, and explore the latest research on alpha-synuclein propagation and spreading, all in layman's terms, of course. Then in segment 2, we'll examine mitochondrial dysfunction. In the simplest terms, we'll discuss the mechanisms of mitochondrial dysfunction and then explore the potential therapeutic agents related to mitochondrial dysfunction. We'll then transition to neuroinflammation in Parkinson's. We'll outline the mechanisms of neuroinflammation and how it contributes to disease progression and explore the therapeutic agents related to neuroinflammation. Finally, we'll look at disease development and we'll look at genetic and environmental factors for Parkinson's. We'll talk about the role of environmental factors such as toxin and lifestyle and how they play a role in the development of Parkinson's. And then finally, we'll close it out with some exciting new research areas including the gut-brain axis, epigenetics, and neurotropic factors. So if you're interested in learning about the potential causes of Parkinson's and the treatments areas being researched, then join me on our journey of discovery and hope for a cure or breakthrough to help slow the disease and the progression of Parkinson's. All right, let's kick it off with alpha-synuclein aggregation. First, I think it's important to understand what alpha-synuclein is, then discuss how it aggregates or collects and gathers into a mass. Alpha-synuclein is a protein found in the brain. In a healthy brain, it plays a crucial role in the function of neurons or brain cells, particularly in the release of dopamine. However, in individuals with Parkinson's, alpha-synuclein can misfold and aggregate, forming clumps called Lewy bodies. These Lewy bodies are toxic to neurons and are believed to be a major contributor to the death of dopamine-producing cells in the substantia nigra, a region of the brain that plays a vital role in movement. So those of us with Parkinson's are well aware of that. Now, this loss of dopamine neurons leads to the characteristic symptoms of Parkinson's, such as tremors, rigidity, and slow movement. While the exact cause of alpha-synuclein aggregation remains unclear, researchers are investigating several factors that may contribute to the alpha-synuclein misfolding and toxicity to the brain cells. Now, some of the factors being evaluated include genetic predisposition, environmental factors, and just age-related changes in the brain. Understanding the role of alpha-synuclein in Parkinson's is a major focus of current research because it offers potential targets for the development of new treatment options and therapies. All right, now that we have a little bit of background on what alpha-synuclein is and the effect it can have on our brains and the development of Parkinson's, let's look at some of the other diseases associated with alpha-synuclein toxicity that you may hear about during your Parkinson's journey. According to the article, Alpha-Synuclein Toxicity in Neurodegeneration, Mechanisms and Therapeutic Strategies, that was published in Natural Medicine, the other diseases besides Parkinson's associated with alpha-synuclein toxicity include Parkinson's disease with dementia or dementia with Lewy bodies. Another disease is multiple system atrophy or MSA, Gaucher's disease, and Alzheimer's disease. Okay, hopefully I'm not getting too technical so far, and we all understand the role that the clumping of the protein alpha-synuclein has on neurodegeneration and how it ultimately can lead to the development of Parkinson's. All right, but why is the clumping of alpha-synuclein so toxic to our brain cells? Let's look at some of the toxic effects, starting with mitochondrial dysfunction. Clumped alpha-synuclein affects the mitochondria, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later, so I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail. But that leads to energy deficits and oxidative stress on the cells. And I'll go into more detail on how that plays a big role in Parkinson's as well. Synaptic integrity and plasticity. Okay, what does that mean? Clumping of alpha-synuclein disrupts the synaptic integration or synapses where the brain cells transmit information to each other. So this affects the communication between neurons in the brain, which can affect things like movement. So if your neurons can't talk to each other because they're being blocked by these clumps, it's going to affect how you move and a lot of other bodily processes as well. And then neuroinflammation. Alpha-synuclein aggregates can trigger inflammatory responses in glial cells, and they're a specialized cell. But what are glial cells, you ask? That's a good question. Glial cells are known as neuroglia, and they are essential compounds of the nervous system. They provide support to neurons, so they're the brain's signal senders, and they maintain the overall neural environment. They're not the main brain cells, but they're essential brain helpers, and they keep everything running smoothly. I guess some analogies would be if you think about professional golfers, they have the caddy, and the caddy helps them decide on which club to use. Or in other sports, you have the head coach, and then you have assistant coaches to help provide input as well and support coaching the team and making sure everyone understands what they're doing. So those would be some examples of how glial cells would help to support the brain cells. And then finally, clumping of alpha-synuclein can spread from cell to cell and propagate pathology or disease. All right, Chris, what are you trying to tell us? Propagating pathology. Now, what does that mean? Well, essentially, that just refers to the spread of disease-related changes or abnormalities within our bodies. So in terms of Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, the clump proteins can move across neural networks from one neuron to another, which contributes to the progression of the disease. So essentially, it's you played the game Pass It On, where somebody starts something and then you pass it on and you get to the end and you see how you did. If the sentence at the beginning matches the sentence at the end, well, it's similar, that this is just looking at passing information from one neuron to the other down the line. And when it gets disrupted, that can start to cause some of the neural cells to die, which then can lead to disease. All right, let's turn our attention now to the latest research on alpha-synuclein and potential uses of that research for potential drug targets. And let's start with biomarkers. Articles from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, Mayo Clinic, and the Parkinson's Foundation all reported on a spinal fluid test called alpha-synuclein seed amplification assay test. All right, this assay can identify abnormal alpha-synuclein in 93% of PD patients. In the research news article, Breaking News in Parkinson's Disease, Biomarker Found by the Michael J. Fox Foundation, they stated that a new tool can reveal a key pathology of the disease, alpha-synuclein, known as the Parkinson's protein in the brain and body cells. And that was published in the scientific journal The Lancet. And what that does, it opens a new chapter for research with the promise of a future where every person living with Parkinson's can expect improved care and treatments, and newly diagnosed individuals may never advance to the full-blown symptoms. Now, the assay can detect pathology in spinal fluid not only in people diagnosed with Parkinson's, but for those that are at high risk of developing it. This biomarker breakthrough was achieved by an international collaboration of scientists led by the Michael J. Fox Foundation and its landmark clinical study, Parkinson's Progression Marker Initiative, or PPMI. Now, I actually participate in the PPMI initiative, and it's where you share your health and wellness data online every 90 days through targeted surveys that the Michael J. Fox Foundation sends out. So if you would like to participate in clinical research but don't want to be involved in drug studies or other types of medical testing, this is a great option for participating by providing information on your experiences with Parkinson's. So what they're looking for in this study is each time they ask what changes you're experiencing, what are some of your biggest issues that you have to deal with. So they're collecting all this data across the globe and then trying to use that to help come up with new targets and therapies to help slow the progression or prevent Parkinson's. In an article from Johns Hopkins Medicine, new studies suggest cancer drug could be used to target protein connection that spurs Parkinson's disease. And that was just published on June the 17th of this year. And the article says that in genetically engineered mice, Johns Hopkins Medicine researchers say they have identified a potentially new biological target involving APL-P1, a cell surface protein that drives the spread of Parkinson's disease, causing alpha-synuclein, and we've heard that before, to clump. The findings published in Nature Communications on May 31st reveal how APL-P1 connects with LAG-3, another cell surface receptor, in a key process that helps spread the harmful alpha-synuclein proteins to brain cells. These protein buildups are hallmarks of Parkinson's disease. All right, now it's not necessarily important that you know what APL-P1 is and LAG-3, but just that they've been able to identify a means to help to try to stop the spread of alpha-synuclein to the brain to damage the nerve cells. The article goes on to say that our findings also suggest that targeting this interaction between APL-P1 and LAG-3 with drugs could significantly slow the progression of Parkinson's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases. So far, we've looked at detection of alpha-synuclein with the spinal fluid seed amplification assay and spread with the one I just talked about, the APL-P1 and LAG-3 proteins and receptors in the Hopkins study. Now let's look at two other exciting areas of research. The next is spreading. Now, we all know that once alpha-synuclein becomes damaged and spreads, it has the potential to travel from neuron to neuron, which then can potentially kill the neurons. Alpha-synuclein may spread from neuron to neuron through what they call self-amplification and could initiate potentially in the GI tract and travel to the brain via the vagus nerve. Now, I actually did a podcast on this called the gut-brain axis. So researchers have found that there's also alpha-synuclein in the GI tract, and there's some other things that go along with the gut-brain axis. So if you're interested, it's a great area of study that they're looking at for Parkinson's, but they're also looking at the gut biome. They're thinking, one of the thinking is, and I think there was a study done where they've been able to find where the alpha-synuclein has traveled up the vagus nerve to the brain, where it deposits in the brain and then kills the brain cells. The thinking is that alpha-synuclein in the gut may be misfolded and then travel to the brain along the vagus nerve and again be deposited in the brain. So think of it this way. Try to give you an analogy. A truck picks up a load of bad or spoiled meat and delivers it to the grocery store on the roads. Then someone buys the spoiled meat and gets sick. While maybe not the best analogy, it gives you a sense of how the misfolded alpha-synuclein can travel to the brain and cause disease. So it's no different than a truck picking up damaged product and delivering it to the store where somebody can buy it and then have some harmful effects from it. Finally, let's talk about waste removal. This is another area that they're looking into for potential therapies for Parkinson's. Faulty waste disposal processes in the neuron may allow toxic substances like alpha-synuclein to build up. Research is interested in restoring proper waste disposal pathways in the cells. although some studies suggest that alpha-synuclein deposition in the skin may be an early biomarker for early PD. So essentially what they're looking at is if you think of when there's a garbage strike, or just in your house, if you don't have a good waste removal system and the trash starts to build up, it's going to start to smell and could potentially cause disease because it can draw rats and insects and other things that carry disease. So it's important, just like in your house, that you take out the trash. The same thing in the cell. You want to get rid of all the faulty waste that's in the cell so that it doesn't damage the neurons, which are important for us to help us move and do a lot of the other things that we do on a daily basis. All right, now I hope this hasn't been too technical. All right, now that we've explored alpha-synuclein's role in PD, let's look at another new area, mitochondrial dysfunction. You're thinking to yourself, what is he talking about? Well, let's try to make this simple. If you think back to high school biology class, and for some of you that may cause nightmares, and for others you may have really liked biology, but usually one of the things that they teach in biology, which I taught biology for 3 years, is that you talk about the cell and you talk about all the little organelles in the cell. And one of the components of the cell that we talk about is the mitochondria. Now, I'll give you 100 points if you can remember what the mitochondria does in the cell. What does the mitochondria do? Well, if you said energy production, you're our winner. In fact, it's often got the nickname the powerhouse of the cell because it produces energy, but it also stores calcium, helping to regulate the cell or the calcium level in your cells. And they also produce heat and play a role in controlled cell death or apoptosis. Now you're thinking, why do you have to have apoptosis or controlled cell death? Well, old cells aren't as efficient as new cells. So as new cells are being generated, the old cells die off and then are disposed of. So the mitochondria also are involved in helping to control apoptosis. So what is mitochondrial dysfunction and what's its role in Parkinson's? Well, mitochondrial dysfunction refers to the impaired function of mitochondria, or the powerhouse of the cell. So if you think about it, if your furnace is damaged or the battery in your car is damaged, you're not going to get the energy to either heat the house or run your car. So it's going to have a direct impact on whether the car moves or not, or whether your house is warm. So the organelles that are in the cell, which I talked about briefly, are responsible for generating energy in the form of ATP. Now, wait, what did I just say? Organelles? Now, what does that mean? Well, organelles are just little specialized units within the cell, and they each have a specialized function. So think of it this way. If you have a building with a business in there, a lot of times you'll have specialized units. You'll have a marketing department, you'll have a sales department, you'll have a shipping department, billing department, and HR department. So they're all specialized units within that business. So think of it that way when you think of the cell. You have your cell, whether it's a brain cell or a bone cell or a red blood cell, they have within them these different organelles that do different things. And in this case, the mitochondria are what's going to help provide power and do those other things that we talked about. All right, so here's how mitochondria dysfunction plays a significant role in Parkinson's disease. The first is energy deficit. Whenever you have impaired mitochondria, it leads to a reduction in the amount of energy they produce. And this causes an energy deficiency in the neurons. So it's just like us as people. If we can't get enough nutrients, it's going to put stress on our bodies, and eventually we're going to die off. And the same thing happens with the neurons. The lack of energy production can lead to stress on the cells and then cell death, which then, if they're neurons that produce dopamine, then that's going to help lead to Parkinson's disease. Number 2 is oxidative stress. You may have heard about oxidative stress or seen it when they're talking about healthy diets. But mitochondrial dysfunction can lead to oxidative stress and neuron damage. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in oxidative stress here in just a minute. And then number 3 is calcium deregulation. The mitochondria play a role in helping to regulate the amount of calcium in your cells. So if there's a problem with your mitochondria or mitochondrial dysfunction, it can lead to calcium dysregulation, which can further contribute to neuron damage. So we damage the neurons, they don't produce the dopamine that we need, and we start to experience the motor symptoms of Parkinson's. And then number 4, genetic factors. Mutations in genes involved in mitochondrial function have been implicated in Parkinson's disease. So what this suggests is that there's a genetic link in Parkinson's. Overall, mitochondrial dysfunction is a key factor in the development and progression of Parkinson's. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up, is that it's one of the areas of research that's being studied, and it can have a potential impact on some of the treatment therapies that are out there. So what causes mitochondrial dysfunction? Well, according to research, there's no simple answer. It's a complex process that involves several interconnecting mechanisms. Now, this can get pretty technical, so I'm going to try to break it down so that we can all understand it. Hopefully, you're like me and you just want the basic picture so that I grasp the concept and know how it applies to me. All right, so let's start with oxidative stress. Okay, and oxidative stress is caused by reduced antioxidant defenses. Now, you may have heard of antioxidants. Some people take antioxidant supplements. So Parkinson's is associated with a decrease in antioxidant enzymes that makes the cells more susceptible to oxidative damage. So if this sounds familiar, you may have heard that you should eat lots of fruits and vegetables to prevent damage from free radicals that can damage your cells. They're related, but they're not quite the same. Antioxidants neutralize free radicals to help or prevent or minimize damage to your cells, where oxidative stress happens when the free radical production exceeds your body's ability to neutralize it. So the first one is antioxidants that you take in from your diet or supplements can help neutralize the free radicals to prevent damage. But when the levels get too high and your body can't keep up with the ability to neutralize the free radicals, that's when you have oxidative stress, which then damages the cells. So the long and short of it is, eat a healthy, balanced diet full of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants to help you neutralize these free radicals. Now, another reason to help limit oxidative stress and the damage it causes is because it can lead to misfolding of proteins, including alpha-synuclein. I think we just talked about that, and how it's associated with Parkinson's. Now let's look at some genetic factors. Let's just keep this really simple and say mutations in the genes, and I'm not talking about Levi's and Wrangler genes, can cause damage to the mitochondria. There, pretty simple, huh? So if you have a gene mutation, it can cause damage to the mitochondria in the cell, which can then cause mitochondrial dysfunction, which then is going to potentially lead to Parkinson's. Environmental factors. Exposure to certain toxins, such as pesticides and heavy metals, can damage your mitochondria and contribute to Parkinson's, as well as chronic inflammation can impair mitochondrial function. So there's certain toxins out there, herbicides, pesticides, and there's some cleaning products as well, which I'll talk about in a minute, but they all can lead to disruption in the ability of mitochondria to generate energy, which is going to cause, again, stress on the neurons, that produce dopamine and they could die off and then again lead to Parkinson's. And then the next one is protein aggregation. We might have talked about this already, but let's see. Alpha-synuclein clumping can impair the mitochondria. I think we might have talked about, right, alpha-synuclein and how it clumps. But yes, alpha-synuclein clumping can impair mitochondria. Well, hopefully that didn't cause your eyes to roll in the back of your head and cause you to pass out. So hopefully I tried to keep that fairly general so that we all were able to understand it. Now, hopefully you're still hanging in there with me as we move into some potential therapies to help with mitochondrial dysfunction. So let's start with mitochondrial biogenesis, which simply means helping to stimulate the production of new mitochondria to compensate for the damaged older ones. So if you can help to create new mitochondria and replace the ones that are damaged, the cells will be able to produce the energy they need to keep your neurons healthy. So that's one area that they're looking at. Another is improving quality control for mitochondria, and that's removing damaged mitochondria to help maintain the health of the rest of the mitochondria. So it's kind of like, if you think about it, if you have a bowl of apples and one of the apples is bad on the bottom, it could start to spread to the others. Or the same thing, have you ever gone to the store and bought strawberries and you think, oh, these are great, and then down in the middle there's a moldy one, and then that's spread to the other strawberries and rendered them no good. So by helping to remove the damaged or rotten piece, you can help maintain the health of the rest of the mitochondria. So, and there's two compounds being examined, PINK1 and Parkin, which we'll talk about a little bit later on here. And then back to our buddy oxidative stress. So helping to protect the mitochondria from oxidative stress with vitamins, flavonoids, and other antioxidant compounds are being investigated. If you take vitamins, or you might have heard of flavonoids, but any other type of antioxidants, there's a number of them out there that claim that contain a lot of antioxidants, and they're looking at those as a way to combat oxidative stress and help protect your mitochondria from damage. And again, you protect the mitochondria from damage, you protect the neurons from dying, and you have healthier neurons and that are able to produce the dopamine that we need. Number 4 is calcium regulation. Too much calcium in the cell can damage the mitochondria, so preventing excess calcium can reduce damage. And one of the things they're looking at is, which a number of people take, is calcium channel blockers. And if you take a calcium channel blocker, you know that it's typically used for high blood pressure, angina or chest pain, and certain irregular heart rhythms or arrhythmias. So they're looking at a commonly used prescription drug, which a lot of those are generic now, the generic channel blockers, and they're using those, helping to regulate the calcium in the cell so that it doesn't damage the neurons and cause cell death. And the next is preventing alpha-synuclein aggregation. So they're looking at compounds that can interfere with alpha-synuclein aggregation or clumping, or promote its clearance. So if you can either prevent it from clumping or misfolding, or you can prevent it from being transported. So if it can be cleared without damaging other cells, that would be a great thing. So it's a good thing that you're all alpha-synuclein experts, since it keeps coming up in our discussion, and you may hear it as we go on too. So let's move on to the next culprit in the potential development of Parkinson's, and one you may have seen in the news or read about, and that's neuroinflammation. Neuroinflammation is a key feature of Parkinson's. It involves the activation of immune cells within the brain, which causes the release of inflammatory molecules that can damage your neurons. So, how does neuroinflammation play a key role in Parkinson's? Well, first, it can damage the neurons, or your brain cells, that produce dopamine. Inflammatory molecules such as cytokines, and I'll talk about those in a minute, can directly damage neurons, contributing to their cell death. And again, if the neurons die, then we're unable to produce the dopamine and serotonin and some of the other neurotransmitters that we need. Second, and here we go again, alpha-synuclein aggregation. Neuroinflammation can promote alpha-synuclein to clump, which can lead to the formation of Lewy bodies, which are toxic to neurons. So if Lewy bodies are formed, they're going to, again, kill off the neurons that we need to help us with movement and other bodily functions. Now, third, and you thought you were done with this one, not so fast, neuroinflammation can lead to, you guessed it, mitochondrial dysfunction. Inflammation can impair the function of mitochondria, which, as we know by now, are the powerhouses of the cell, and they're creating the energy. And when they're damaged, it causes an energy deficit, and which leads to oxidative stress, and which can lead to cell death. While neuroinflammation is a significant factor in Parkinson's, it's important to note it's not the sole cause. Genetic predisposition and environmental factors also play a key role. So let's look at some of the research in potential therapies to prevent or reduce neuroinflammation and its negative impact on the neurons. The first is anti-inflammatory drugs. Medications that reduce inflammation, such as your nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, your NSAIDs, and corticosteroids are being studied for their potential benefits in Parkinson's. So what would be some examples of NSAIDs? That would be your ibuprofen, your naproxen, or your Aleve, and the corticosteroids are going to help reduce inflammation as well. So some of you may have had an allergic reaction and your doctor gave you a prednisone pack, which are steroidal, and that's why you wean off of them, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so they're all being studied for their anti-inflammatory benefits. And then targeting cytokines, and they're looking at therapies to interfere with the production and effects of these pro-inflammatory cytokines. Now, what is a cytokine and what's its function? Well, one of the key functions of cytokines are they're small signaling cells that help you regulate your immune response and inflammation. So if you have both acute and chronic inflammation, they can be beneficial in fighting infections, but too many cytokines can contribute to tissue damage. So they're beneficial in one sense in that they help regulate the immune response by signaling cells that, hey, there's a problem. And so they leads to the immune response and inflammation around the site of infection. But again, too many is going to damage your cells. So in a nutshell, cytokines can have both a beneficial and harmful effects. They help us maintain a healthy immune system, but too much cytokine production can contribute to a variety of autoimmune diseases. Lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, type 1 diabetes, would all be considered autoimmune diseases. All right, the next is that they're evaluating is neuroprotective agents. Again, antioxidants are being evaluated as potential therapies to help neutralize the free radicals that are associated with neuroinflammation. So where do we get these antioxidants again? From our diet. It's one good place, as well as supplements, but diet's a great place to start. If you eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and some whole grains, you're going to get the antioxidants that you need to help prevent some of this inflammation. And then the next is lifestyle interventions. See, therapies don't always have to be pharmacological or have a drug solution to them. So we want to talk about some lifestyle interventions that they're looking at to help reduce neuroinflammation. The first is diet. A healthy diet, again, rich in antioxidants and anti-inflammatory foods, can help reduce inflammation throughout the body, including the brain. So what would be an inflammatory food? Sugar. Too much sugar, and that's part of the problem with the American diet. There's too much sugar, and sugar causes inflammation, and inflammation has detrimental effects throughout the body, including the brain. So if we can eat a healthy diet and reduce the inflammation, then we can have a hopefully healthier brain. And then, yes, your favorite of mine, let's say it together, exercise. Yes, regular exercise or physical activity. All right, if you don't like the word exercise, you can use physical activity. They can have anti-inflammatory effects. So it's important that you incorporate exercise into your daily routine or physical activity to help reduce inflammation throughout your body. And then next is stress management techniques. You can do things like meditation, yoga, and deep breathing because they can help reduce stress because stress is linked to inflammation. So if you're constantly stressed, your body is usually in a state of inflammation somewhere, and that can cause problems throughout the body. So if you can reduce your stress through these different techniques, you're going to be better off in the long run. And then looking at some emerging therapies. Some emerging therapies include gene therapy, where they target specific genes involved in neuroinflammation, and they can offer some novel therapeutic approaches. So they're targeting specific genes that they can turn on to help with to reduce or prevent neuroinflammation. And then another is stem cell therapy. Introducing stem cells into the brain may help reduce inflammation and promote repair. Now, I just read a study that there's a couple stem cell research studies going on, and so far they've had good success. One of the things they have to watch out for is some of the side effects. So that's one of the things that they have to manage is the side effect profile. All right, moving on to our next culprit in the potential causes of Parkinson's is genetic and environmental factors. Now, while Parkinson's can occur in individuals with no known family history, genetic factors do play a significant role in the development of PD. Several genes have been identified as risk factors for PD, and some of the major risk factors include mutations in Parkinson's disease genes. Yes, if you didn't know, there are some Parkinson's disease genes. So let's look at some of the bad actors. The first one is SNCA, and I didn't want to give you the scientific name because it would just get confusing and muddle things up. But SNCA is mutations in the alpha-synuclein gene, and they're the most common genetic cause of PD. So if someone has mutations in that SNCA gene, the alpha-synuclein gene, they have a higher chance of developing PD. The next one is PARK2, just like we're going to the park. Again, mutations in the Parkin gene, PARK2, are also a common cause of early onset PD. And Parkin is involved in the degrading of damaged proteins, including, you guessed it, alpha-synuclein. So another one is PINK1, not the singer. PINK1, mutations in PINK1 gene can lead to PD by impairing the mitochondrial function. And again, we know that if the mitochondria don't function, they don't produce energy, and then they, again, kill off the cells. So PINK1 can impair the mitochondrial function, leading to Parkinson's. The next one is, you might have seen this if you go to the Michael J. Fox website, it's LRRK2. Mutations in the LRRK2 gene are associated with both early onset and late onset PD. So that's the genetic component for some of the causes of PD. Now let's look at some of the environmental factors that are involved as well and how they can interact with these genes. So by themselves, they may not cause a problem, but when these environmental factors interact with genes, that can cause a problem. So the effects of genetic risk factors can be influenced by environmental factors. For example, if an individual that has a pre-genetic disposition to PD may be more susceptible to the harmful effects of certain environmental toxins like pesticides. So you might have read that some of the areas you're exploring for causes of Parkinson's is environmental toxins such as pesticides and herbicides. But if you're already genetically predisposed, it's going to put you at a higher potential to get Parkinson's. So it's important to note that genetic factors are important. Environmental factors may also play a role in the development of PD. So it's a combination of both, but the gene would be more important and the environmental toxin would be the supporting actor in that particular situation. Some environmental factors include exposure to toxins like pesticides, like paraquat, cleaning chemicals like trichloroethylene or TCE, and heavy metals. Now, according to the article, can environmental toxins cause Parkinson's disease? Heavy metals like manganese at a high dose exposure have been linked to certain jobs like welding, and they increase the risk of developing Parkinson's. So you have to be careful with heavy metals because, especially if you're welding or doing those type of jobs, because you're at increased risk for Parkinson's. And then solvents like trichloroethylene, TCE again. Now I mentioned that they're used in the industrial settings for metal degreasing and dry cleaning, but they're also used in paint thinners and detergents. And they've shown a link between long-term exposure to the development of Parkinson's. So it's important that you're very careful if you're handling the TCEs if you don't have Parkinson's. But if you do have Parkinson's, that may be one of the causes that if you've had long-term exposure. Finally, pesticides and herbicides have shown a link between exposure and the incidence of Parkinson's. Now, some of these include rotenone and permethrin. Now, permethrin, it can be found in clothing or nets to kill mosquitoes. Now, I like to do a lot of fly fishing, and they make shirts that you can wear that are lightweight and they have UV protection in them. And they also put permethrin in there to be an insect repellent. Well, permethrin can be a potential environmental toxin. So just something to be that I found in the research. Now, besides environmental toxins, head injuries and certain medications may play a role. Well, maybe I guess I was on the right track, or when I was onto something when I said at the beginning, I wondered if the number of concussions I had because of football played a role. I'm going to have to do a little more research to find out more about that. So now that we understand the genes and environmental factors and how they may play a significant role in the development of Parkinson's, if you notice or may have noticed that all four of these areas we discussed, alpha-synuclein, mitochondrial dysfunction, neuroinflammation, and genetic and environmental factors, all have significant overlap with each other in terms of their effects on Parkinson's, as well as a lot of the ongoing research. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about these four specific areas, because there's a lot of overlap in how they interact to potentially cause Parkinson's, and as well as a lot of research that's going on to help develop new therapies to help either slow the progression or with motor symptoms at this point. Finally, to close out our discussion, I'll briefly discuss some of the emerging research areas into the pathogenesis of Parkinson's. So the first is the gut-brain axis. And again, I've done a podcast on this, so if you're looking for a lot more detail and information, check it out. Now, essentially, there's research that shows that alpha-synuclein is found in both the brain and the gut. Who knew from our discussion that misfolded alpha-synuclein can dump and form Lewy bodies, which are characteristics of Parkinson's? I think we all learned that at the beginning. So it's believed to be the bad or folded alpha-synuclein that may start in the gut and travel up the vagus nerve and be deposited in the brain, which is going to cause damage which could lead to Parkinson's. Secondly, your gut microbiome, and again, I talk about this in the podcast, and that's just the community of microorganisms living in your GI tract, both good and bad, and how they can influence the immune system and inflammation, which we discussed earlier as a potential contributor to Parkinson's. This suggests that gut health may play a role in disease development. And then finally, neurotransmitters, including dopamine and serotonin, which play an important role in GI function and brain health. When there is an imbalance in these neurotransmitters, they may contribute to Parkinson's. So there's a lot of study going on looking at some of these neurotransmitters. And then the next emerging area is epigenetics, which is the study of how environmental factors and behaviors cause changes in the genes without affecting the underlying DNA sequence. So think of it this way. DNA is like the blueprint for a building. Epigenetics is like adding or removing furniture from the building or changing the paint color. These changes don't alter the blueprint itself, but they do affect how the building is used and how the building looks. So the actual structure of the building is still the same. It's just the insides are altered and different. And then neurotropic factors, which are proteins that support the survival, growth, and differentiation of neurons, and they play a crucial role in the brain development and plasticity. Neurotropic factors are being studied as potential therapies to promote survival and regeneration of neurons. Now, some examples include gene therapy and protein therapy. While neurotropic factors show promise as potential therapies for Parkinson's, there are some significant challenges in the delivery system, efficacy, and some of the potential side effects. So there's cause for further research to help manage the ways to better deliver the therapy, as well as manage some of the potential side effects. So as we conclude this exploration of therapeutic advances in Parkinson's research, it's clear that significant progress has been made, but there's still much to be done. While there have been some groundbreaking discoveries, some we've mentioned, like the alpha-synuclein seed amplification assay test, the field of research is continually evolving. So to support ongoing research and improve the lives of individuals with Parkinson's, I encourage you to donate to Parkinson's research organizations like the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Your contributions can fund vital research projects that may lead to new treatments and potential cures. Next, spread the awareness. Educate others about Parkinson's disease and the importance of research. Next, share this podcast and other resources with friends and family. Participate in clinical trials. If you or someone you know is living with Parkinson's, consider participating in clinical trials to help advance research. Join a support group to connect with others living with Parkinson's. Sharing experiences and support can make a significant difference in everyone's lives. So by taking these steps, we can collectively work toward a future where Parkinson's is no longer a debilitating condition. Together, we can make a difference. So hopefully you have a better understanding of some of the causes of Parkinson's disease now, and you can share that information with friends and family. And just to give you a little bit better understanding yourself of why me, why did I get Parkinson's? Maybe some of what we talked about can help answer those questions as well. And then finally, as we conclude, I would ask that you visit liveparkinsons.com and sign up for the free monthly newsletter. In fact, the September newsletter, which I'm going to be publishing here soon, the focus topic is pain, Parkinson's pain. So there's going to be a lot of great information in there on Parkinson's pain and some of the tips and strategies you can use to overcome those challenges. In addition, there's other additional free resources on there, as well as blog articles and a discussion board. And one of the new things that I added, and it was after much thought and discussion with a bunch of friends, was I added a link to a Ko-fi page. And so if people feel the need to help support this podcast and the website, you can go to the Ko-fi page and buy a cup of coffee, and that'll help support the cost of the website and the podcast and all the research that goes into it to help to develop some of the resources. So that I added that as something new just to help to try to keep the podcast and website going. So I thank you for listening, and I hope you have a spectacular day, and I hope to see you on future podcasts. Thanks again.